On the eve of the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March, press coverage, conversation, and even acknowledgement seems to be noticeably absent. Much of the feelings, apprehensions, debates, and confusion are today as it was in 1995. The question is, have we made any progress over the last 20 years? And why would we expect that progress would happen overnight? Unfortunately, most progress happens in our communities when it feels good to us rather than when it's the right thing to do. Case in point, it was in March of 1995, 130 years later, that the state of Mississippi finally ratified the 13th Amendment to approve the abolishment of slavery. Progress for the right thing is always astonishingly slow. As a relatively young man beginning my entry into community work, establishing the local organizing committee in Albany, New York was one of my big projects. Hindsight informs me today that much of why I was so eager to be part of the then upcoming 1995 Million Man March is the same reason I am so eager today. Our communities need healing. The streets were hot all over the nation back then. Nothing was hotter than the brewing tension between Biggie Smalls and Tupac. The airwaves were blazing with song after song, fueling not only a battle between rap rivals, but also the legions of fans and supporters that divided the East Coast from the West Coast in communities all over the country. In the midst of it, the Nation of Islam's leader, Minister Louis Farrakhan, was calling for black men to show up on the Mall in Washington, D.C. on October 16th to atone for our sins and to heal our land.
And so today we have to deal with the root so that perhaps a healing can take place.
That same year, Tupac was released from prison, and on October 15th, he signed his contract with Death Row Records. But the calling came too late for two young, inspiring artists from the same background, raised under the same conditions, in communities with a lack of resources, bleak opportunities, profitable drama, and fatherless households. Both men were killed within 6 months of each other despite the clarion call of the Million Man March just a few years earlier. Although in 2015 the rap rivalry was over, our streets still have not gotten the memo that the war between us was over. Because of that, no one thinks bringing 1 million black men together makes any sense. I vaguely remember a conversation in 1995 with one of my Christian friends who challenged me on why I would follow a Muslim leader and what does he mean by atonement. Recalling that conversation has prepared me for the ongoing debate around the or else connotation. To be honest, the very notion of the question insults my intelligence as if I or we as black men don't understand the meaning of or else in any context. The truth is, we have been living in or else reality since 1619. In 1963, Dr. King was sitting in a Birmingham jail and he had this to say.
I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly.
Dr. King was talking about the absolute necessity and the overwhelming desire for justice. Yet in doing so, he was talking to his own people about the need to come together in unity. He recognized our condition and the criticalness to do something about it. Deeper in the famous letter from a Birmingham jail, written for King's colleagues and clergy, he broke down what he believed was our accountability and the consequences for non-action. King said,
"It is unfortunate that demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham, but it is even more unfortunate that the city's white power structure left the Negro community with no alternative."
Having toiled in my communities for over 25 years, I understand the sentiment of the calling. It is a calling that speaks specifically to me in the ministry of speaking to the hearts of men. As a result of that purpose, I know my lanes and I can co-labor within the context of justice or else to the betterment of my work. King makes it clear to me that or else is an accountability calling. It speaks to the consequences, not the actions. Research paper after research paper points out the impact of fatherlessness in our communities. 2015 marks the 50th anniversary of the Moynihan Report. It spoke of the consequences of not having working black fathers actively involved in the sustainability of their families. It foretold a statistical story of or else for black families. Furthermore, it warned about the eventual effects of not supporting or building the capacity of those men to provide for their children. Unfortunately, one of the after effects, due to the inaction of our leaders and the inattentiveness to the consequences, is that the out-of-wedlock birth rate rose from 29% then to 72% today. Now, this is not a death sentence for our children. However, it is one of the first indicators of poverty and other developmental issues for black children. This year's Million Man March won't solely solve our issues. However, it's an opportunity, at least in my work, to recognize both the failures and the accomplishments of black fathers across the nation. Pew Research indicates that black fathers are the most engaged fathers in day-to-day activities with their children than any other cohort of fathers in this country. That's something to celebrate. At the same time, we must remember we still have a long way to go. And I accept that calling and mission. I know that if I don't accept this calling, whatever happens as a result is my own or else consequence. It is unacceptable for that to happen on my watch, and I pray that it's unacceptable to you also. In the beautiful words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as he closed his letter by saying, "Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty." We are honorable men and women in the middle of a struggle for equality. It is now in 2015 as it was in 1995, 85, 75, 65, and so on. I expect and pray that a positive spirit of the Million Man March finds its place in the hearts of men, and that we find ways to positively impact the consequences of or else for not only just us, but also all of us. For some 21 years now, those of you have known that I've put my heart in this community to do what I thought God was appointing me to do in this community through my newspapers, through my work with the NAACP, with the Urban League, with the YMCA, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And now in my capacity of ED as Fathers Incorporated, with what God has set on my life 10 years ago to speak to the hearts of men, I've refocused and dedicated this part of my work to really beginning to address what's happening with our men and our boys in this community.
We are African, and we happen to be in America. We're not American. We are people who formerly were Africans who were kidnapped and brought to America.
It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check.
That doesn't mean that I didn't feel my father's absence. That's something that leaves a hole in a child's heart.
I come from a single-parent household, and I didn't have any role models, any positive male role models, shall I say. You know, and kind of tying back into what Janisha said and why we care cool kids. As a kid, what we thought was cool is not what we're doing. And I care because if they knew better, they do better. And if we can show the youth that it's cool to give back, it's cool to excel beyond the limitations of where you live and what you see every day, then we can make a difference. And you know, we were all afforded the luxury of a formal education. You know, we're all doing well in various professions. And if we can't come back and place that at the feet of our people, we're not worth anything.